What's up, everybody? Welcome back to One More Guitar. Thank you for watching. Remember to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to help me out. It really does help the channel. Last week we talked about how to create chords from the major scale, and so today I want to show you how to actually make those chords on the guitar and play them. So I want to get something out of the way here, and I want to be as honest with you as I can be. This is one of the hardest parts about learning guitar, because playing chords with your note hand and strumming with your strumming hand are two totally separate skills, but you need them both to work on the other one, right? So this is one of the biggest hurdles you're going to have to get over when you're learning how to play guitar. But it's really not as bad as you may think it is. It just takes a little time and patience. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to focus only on this hand. We'll do one strum just so you can hear the chord. But really we're going to focus on this hand. And then next week I'll focus more on the strumming hand. So let's get into this. So like I mentioned, in the last lesson we learned how to create chords from the major scale. And if you haven't seen that, or if you don't know how to do that, there should be a link popping up above. You can go watch that video and then come back to this one. It'll make a lot more sense. Okay, so there's 5 chords that I want to show you today. I want to show you A, C, D, E, and G major. And the reason I want to show you those chords is because they have open strings in them that helps you make the chord easier. This is known as an open chord. You may hear me say that later. So I'm going to show you the 5 major open chords. Not only are these chords a little easier to play, but they're also the basis for some patterns that I'm going to show you later to help you play lead guitar. We're not going to worry about that right now, but just know that these shapes are movable and it's important to remember them. So I'm going to show you how to find the notes on the strings and where to put your fingers to properly play these open chords. The first thing we should do is take a look at the notes in each of these chords and have those as a reference for us. So let's take a look at that. Before we look at the notes on the fretboard, let's find the notes for each of these chords. We'll start with the music alphabet, and then we will find the major scale for each chord we're trying to find, and then we'll find the chord. Using the major scale pattern, written here in green, we can find the notes for the A major scale where A is our root note. If we then follow our pattern of starting with the root note and then skipping a note in the scale until we have 3 notes, what we have is A, C sharp, and E. Just so it's clear, we're only concerned with the bolded notes here. So we have the A note, we skip the B note, then we have the C sharp note, we skip the D note, and we have the E note. So let's do the same thing for the C chord. Here are the notes of the C major scale. And if we do this skip a note trick, here are the notes that we find for the chord. The notes are C, E, and G. So you can keep doing this to find the notes for the remaining chords. I'm just going to show them on the screen here. If you don't know how to find the notes in the chords, go back and check out the previous lesson, the introduction to the major scale, and that should show you how to find the notes. Okay, so now it's time to find these notes on the guitar. Now, as you've seen, the notes repeat and the fretboard is covered with notes. So how do you find the chords? Where do you start? Well, I'm going to give you a little rule for this. I don't know if this works for every single chord, but it's going to work for these beginner chords I'm going to show you. So I just kind of came up with this, so forgive me if this completely goes off the rails, but this is what I got. Okay, so to find these chords, what we want to do is we want to start with the lowest string and find the note somewhere within the first 4 frets. If you don't find the note in the first 4 frets, you move to the next string and you keep going until you find the note you're looking for. So the first note you want to find is the root note of the chord. After that, you just keep going until you find at least each of the 3 notes that you need to make up the chord. But for a guitar player, we really want the strings to ring out, as many as we can. Not all the time, but just in general, you know, when you want to make a full sound, you know, you want all the strings to ring out, or as many as you possibly can. So what you do is you just keep stacking notes. You find all the notes that you can actually play under your hand that fit in this chord, and you play them. So that's what we're going to do for these chords. We're going to look at this and see if we can figure out how to make the chords. So the first chord I want to look at is the G major chord. So let's see if we can figure out where the notes are of this chord. So we're going to follow our rule, and the first note in the G chord is G. You always want to try to find the root first when you're doing this exercise. I will make a note that the root doesn't always have to be the lowest note, but for our purposes it's going to be. Okay, so we're going to find the root note. So let's put the music alphabet over the strings and figure out where these notes are at. Okay? So we know that the open string is E, and the next note is F, and the next note is F sharp, and the next note is G. So we found our root note. Excellent. So here's what we do. We just keep walking up until we find another note. So we have G, we have G sharp. Now we've gotten to the 5th fret. The 5th fret does not count, so you have to go start over at the next open string. Okay, so we have A sharp, B. Well, B is another note in our chord, so we want to take that note too. So now we have G and B. Okay, so the next note we need is a D note. Let's see if we can find that. So we're here on the 2nd fret of the A string. We walk up, C. We walk up, C sharp. Now on the 5th fret, there's a D, but we can't use the 5th fret. It's off limits. So you got to move to the next open string. Lucky for us, it's a D, so we don't have to fret anything on that string. We can just play it open. So now what we have is G, B, and D. So we could stop right there. We've got the notes of our chord. We can play the chord right there. But I'm really having to struggle not to play the bottom 3 strings. And like I mentioned earlier, we really want all the strings to ring out. So let's keep stacking notes in this and see what else we've got. So at this point, we have all 3 notes that we need. So any other notes that we come across that are these 3 notes, we can just add them in to make the sound thicker. Okay, so we've already got the first 3 strings covered. So let's move on to the 4th string and figure out what we need there. So the notes we're looking for are G, B, and D. Well, the open G string is a G note. So here again, we can just play this open string and we get a little more thickness to the sound of our chord. See, it's starting to sound a little more full. Let's keep going. Okay, so, oh, and I should say, once you find a note on a string, you can't play another note on that string, so you might as well just move on to the next one. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So remember, we're looking for G, B, and D. So the next string we have is B. So yet another string we don't actually have to play any notes on, that just let it ring out and it's part of this chord. So now we've got all the strings but the last one. Let's see if we can find a note to put on that last string though. Well, if you remember, the top string and the bottom string are the same note. So you can just put your finger down on the 3rd fret of the G string and get another G note. So now you can see we have the G chord. So I'm going to put the chord up on the screen, and I want you to notice the numbers that are in the notes of where these chords are played. Those numbers represent which finger you should use to play the chord. And for a guitar player, your fingers are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. Starting with your index, 4 is your pinky. Okay? If you look at the chord chart, you'll see the fingers you use are the 2nd finger on the E string, the 1st finger on the A string, nothing on the D, G, or B strings, and your 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the high E string. Now, I'm going to make one note about the 3rd finger on the high E string. A lot of times people use their pinky to do that. I myself included. So you can use either finger there. I think a lot of times the reason people use the pinky is because there's another D note right here on the B string. So instead of playing the B, you can play a D there. Just a subtle difference, but You will see a lot of people playing a G with their pinky, but some people do play it with their third finger. So now that you know how to play the chord, what I want you to do is try to get your fingers correctly on the fretboard and strum the chord one time, either using a pick or using the ball of your thumb. Strum the chord one time. The reason you need to do this is to make sure that the notes are ringing out. If you strum and you hear this, you hear some clicking in there, some muted stuff, you're not pressing the strings down, or maybe your fingers are laying too flat across the strings. That happens a lot for beginners too, where you try to play these notes, but your fingers are laying across the other strings, and you don't actually get the sound of the chord. So, I mean, if you have to put your thumb behind the neck of the guitar to push your hand off of it, make sure you're getting each string to ring out. Again, this is going to take some time, so don't worry about it taking time. Just try to do it, and if it doesn't sound right, adjust your hand until it does. And then when you have to change chords, it'll be a mess all over again, but that's part of the learning process. Okay, so now we know how to play a G major chord. Let's move on to another chord. What chord are we going to do? Okay, next let's look at the A chord. Now, we can look over the E string and see what we've got. We've got E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp. Now, we don't have an A in the first 4 frets of the E string, but we could have also been smart about this and realized that we have an open A string, so more than likely that's probably going to be where the chord starts, right? So this chord's a little trickier than the last one because you don't want to play the lowest E string. You may be saying, hey, E's in the chord of A, why can't I play it? Well, you can play it, but really remember the rule that we want to start with the root note for now if we can. So just as a reminder, the notes in the A chord are A, C sharp, and E. So we've got an open A note here that we're going to use. So let's move on to the D string and see if we can find the other notes that we need. We have D, we have D sharp, and we have E. Okay, so we need an E note, so we'll take that note. So the 2nd fret of the D string. So now we have the open A string and the 2nd fret of the D string. Oops, sorry, too much. All right, starting to sound good so far. Let's find another note. All right, let's move over to the G string. We have G, G sharp, and A. Well, we'll take that A note. So we have an A on the 2nd fret of the G string. Let's move on to the B string and see what we've got. We have B, C, C sharp right there. Okay, so far we have the open A string and the 2nd fret on the D string, the G string, and the B string. Sounds pretty good. So if we look at the high E string, well, E's in the chord. Since it's not the lowest note, we'll go ahead and let that ring out too. So the real trick of this one is to remember to start on the 2nd string. And again, this is going to be challenging for you as a beginner because you're thinking about this and it's really hard to think about this. So if you have to strum them all open, do it. It doesn't matter. Again, take your time, do what's comfortable, and do whatever it takes to figure it out. It'll come to you eventually. So just work on the chord for now. If you hit extra string, don't worry about it, but try not to. So make sure you've got the chord formed and strum it one time. Why am I not recording this on here? And that's our A major chord. The other thing I want to point out about the A major chord is you can see the way I'm playing it here. I have my finger barred across those 3 notes that we were going to play. It's all on the 2nd fret, so I just use my finger to play across all of those notes at the same time. So I'm leaving the A string open, and I'm leaving the high E string open. But between the A string and the E string, I have the D string, the G string, and the B string all pressed down with one finger on the 2nd fret. What I want to tell you about this is that sometimes you will see this written like this or like this, where you're using 3 fingers to play the chord. This has its own set of advantages because you can do these little walk downs if you use your 3 fingers. But playing it with 1 finger also has its advantages in, say, a context of rock music. Okay, so you can see that depending on how I play this chord, I can reach different notes. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes it's more convenient to play the A chord with 3 fingers, and sometimes it's more convenient to play it with 1. So just one of those things you got to figure out what works for you and what's more comfortable for you. Okay, the next chord I want to look at is the open E major chord. So this one actually starts pretty easy. We know that the lowest note on the guitar is E. So we can start right there. We know that that note is in our chord because it's the root note of the chord. It has the same name as the chord. So we know that note's in there. So what are the other notes for the chord of E major? Well, you've got G sharp and you've got B. So let's see if we can figure out where these other notes are. So we're already using the open E string. Let's move to the A string and see what we've got. We've got A sharp, and B. Hey, there's a B note. You know, there was a B note at that same position, the 2nd fret of the A string, when we were looking at the G chord. I'm going to start to remember that there's a B note right there. This is what I'm talking about when I refer to landmarks. The more you play stuff, the more you will start to pick up on where notes are at, and you can start to remember where they are. And this will build up in your head over time, but start paying attention to where things are at. If you see something multiple times, maybe remember where you saw it at. Moving on. So now we have the open E and the B note. So we're getting there, but we got to find that G sharp note. So let's move on. We've got the D string. We have D, D sharp, and E. I feel like I also remember that E note being at the 2nd fret of the D string from the A chord we were playing. Okay, so I'm hitting that E note again. Just keep that in mind. So what we have now, we have E, B, and E again. Not quite there. So let's move to the next string. We have G, and then we have G sharp. There's our G sharp note. So we have open E, B, E, and G sharp. All right, we have the E chord. Let's see if we can add a few extra notes from the strings that are remaining. So the next string is open B. Good. We know that B is in the chord, so we can use that. And the next string is open E, which we also know is in the chord, so we can use that. So now we can strum every string to play the E major chord. And again, make sure you look at the position of your fingers on the chord charts that I'm putting up for all these chords. You want to make sure you're playing the chords with the correct fingers because it'll matter in how you move around the guitar later on. Okay, so we've only got 2 chords left to learn, the C chord and the D chord. Now each of these comes with a little bit more of a challenge than the previous chords I've shown you, which is why I've saved them to the end. The C chord is kind of a stretch for new guitar players. It's also kind of hard to jump to that chord from other chords because of the way you have to move your hand. Again, it's not that difficult. I'm just telling you to be prepared to work a little harder on C and D than the other chords. But it's really not any difficult. Okay, so what we want to do is, again, try to find the root note first, which is C. So we can go through the E. We've got E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. There it is. There's the first C note we found in the first 4 frets. So we're going to take that one. So what you should realize is that since we found the root on the 2nd string, is that this is going to be another one of those chords that does not use the lowest string when you play it. You're going to start by strumming from the 2nd string. But let's find the other notes first, and then we'll get back to that. Okay, so moving on to the D string. Sorry, I should say the notes for the C major chord are C, E, and G. So we've got our C. Let's see what else we can find. So on the D string, we have D, D sharp, E. There's that E again. on the 2nd fret of the D string. Again, start building landmarks when you realize stuff like that. I know now that there is an E note on the 2nd fret of the D string no matter what. If I need to find an E note, I can go there. Start remembering those landmarks. All right, moving on to the G string. Well, G is in the chord of C, so we don't have to do anything on this string. It can be an open string for us. Okay? So moving on, we have a B, we have a C. Well, there's the root note again, so we'll go ahead and add that into our chord. And then the last string is an E, which is also in the chord, so we can let that one play. So we can play every string but the thickest one to play our C chord. Again, I want you to strum these 1 or 2 times and just make sure that the notes are ringing out correctly. If you're having trouble getting your hand in this position, just take a deep breath and take it slow and try to stretch your hand out and get the fingers exactly where they're supposed to be. And make sure it's right and strum. So again, take your time. You're not in any hurry. This is something you're going to have fun with for the rest of your life. So, no need to run. You'll get there. Okay. Now I want to show you the last open chord I'm going to show you today, and this is the D chord. So let's just get into figuring out where the notes are for the D chord. Again, we want to find the root first. So I'm going to be a little smarter this time, and I'm going to go directly to the D string because we know there's an open D string. And if we go through the notes that are on the E string and the A string, we will find that there is no D note in the first 4 frets. And that brings me to the reason why the D chord's a little more challenging than the other ones for beginners. Is because not only are you not playing the E string, but you're also not playing the A string when you're playing this chord. You're only playing from the D string down. So we've got the D note. Let's find where the other notes are. So if we move to the G string, the other notes in D are D, F sharp, and A. Those are the 3 notes of the D chord. So we've got the D. Let's see what we've got on the G string. So we have G, G sharp, A. Well, we found another note in the chord, so we can use that. So right now we have the open D and the 2nd fret of the G string. Okay, let's keep going with the B string. We have B, C, C sharp, D. Okay, so we have another root note. All right, and let's see if we've got anything on that last string. We have E, F, and F sharp. There's our last note. Okay, so now we have all 3 notes that we can play. And again, you want to start, let me make sure I get this in camera. You want to start with the pick on the D string. I know it is challenging for beginners to not play every string. So again, if you need to play every string, don't worry about it. Really what you're focusing on right now is getting your fingers to do what you want them to do, to play these chords and be able to move to them. Okay? So if it sounds sloppy on your strumming hand, don't worry about it right now. We'll get there. It's no big deal. Just make sure that you can put your fingers on the strings and make the chords. That's the lesson for today. So I accidentally kicked the camera a second ago when I was going to get something to drink. So if we're at a different angle now, I apologize. Anyway, okay, that's the lesson for today. What I want you to do for practice is I want you to play these chords. Make sure you can strum the chord and that the notes ring out. Okay? So you strum the chord. Also, make sure your guitar's in tune when you do these things. Hold on. What was I saying? I don't even know. All right. Okay, back to practice. What I want you to do is I want you to play every one of these chords. Just try to get your fingers in the correct position. Use the charts. Go look them up. They're online. Get your fingers in the correct position and then play the chord. Once you can play the chord where the notes ring out, I want you to change chords. Go to a different one. Just keep doing that. I want you to do that over and over and over again. Just try to change chords in between these chords and see if you can get to where you can do it smoothly. I mean, the goal is to get to where you can go, or you can just change it when you need to, you know? And I promise you, this is one of the most fun things that you will ever learn to do if you can push yourself through the hump of learning the first few basic chords. So I plan on giving you a little time between this lesson and the next one so you can spend some time with this and make sure you've really got it down. Learning these chords is the basis of playing guitar, and I'm going to teach you more chords in the future. There's more stuff that we have to learn, but these particular chords are very important, especially the shapes. So really burn that into your mind. If you see this, make sure that you can say that's an A. You know, that is D, that's G, that's C, that's E. Really spend some time trying to learn these chords. I cannot stress that enough. So I hope this helps you out. I'm really looking forward to getting into playing a little more, and I'm excited for you. So spend some time looking at these chords, and when we come back, we'll start taking a look at different ways to strum so we can play these chords in different patterns and stuff. Once you get that, man, you're on your way to playing music, and I'm really happy for you. And if you're watching this and you've gotten this far and you really are trying to learn, I'm super excited for you. Take it easy and keep playing.